The conference, 1977 Conference of American Indigenous People at Geneva, Switzerland, the Native people made this statement. No matter how much of a problem we have as human beings, first of all, tell the world about the suffering of Mother Earth. Tell them first how the forests are being destroyed, how our rivers are made dirty by the gold mining. Where is the seat of the eagle? Who represents the trees? Who represents the fish at the United Nations? Today, let justice for Mother Earth be our message. We must cease hostile intentions. We must cease thinking bad thoughts. We must cease being angry with our brothers and sisters. We must cease damaging our precious Mother Earth. We must cease injuring the children of Mother Earth and the forest, the oceans, the rivers, the fish, the birds, the fawn, the yearling, the grass, the soil, and all else that breathes in wonder.
Welcome to Border Crossings. I'm Elliot Margulies. I'm having a great time with my guests. We've gone through half a plate of these ginger snaps that I want to tell you I baked for the guests. We've been talking about Earth Day 1999. And Border Crossings is a new series produced by the Mid-Peninsula Access Corporation, and we delve into regional issues and regional solutions. We usually have a table full of local government officials and policymakers, or we are going to. This is only our second show. But today's a little different. The reason we chose a theme of Earth Day for our second show is because it crosses about every border you can think of on this planet as we focus on the health of the planet. And with me today, I have two citizen activists in our local environmental movement and a city council member from City of Palo Alto. I'm joined by Debbie Mytels, who is the executive director of Canopy, which is making sure that we protect and nurture our urban forest. Debbie's done a million things that I'm not even going to try to list, but I know that she's also been executive director of Leadership Mid-Peninsula. I know you rode in the AIDS ride last. You're just a Renaissance person.
But I don't paint.
No painting. And Susan Stansbury is the executive director of Bay Area Action. And Bay Area Action actually grew out of Earth Day 1990, which Susan was part of here in Palo Alto. And Bay Area Action is an organization that's a watchdog on a whole range of environmental issues locally. And we are also joined by Council Member Dena Mossar from City of Palo Alto. And Dena, in her role as council member, is also serving on a regional board called the Bay Area Air Quality District, AQMD. And before that, she was commute coordinator for the Palo Alto Medical Clinic and brings her own history of environmental work to the table. So I guess I'd almost like to go back to our conversation when we were waiting for the cameras to roll. Dena mentioned a pretty sobering statistic a while ago that what we have in the population now in California is 35 million. And in 20 years, it's projected to be 59 million, right?
That's what I remember, the numbers being there, roughly that.
So who's going to How many people are you taking into your house?
I wasn't planning on taking
Welcome,
any.
Iowans. Come in. Join us here. What does that mean for the work that the two of you do? I mean, what do you see up ahead? And is this a given?
Well, I don't know that it has to be a given. I think that those projections are based upon increased population growth, and perhaps there will be some way in which we can begin, not just as a country or a state, but as a globe, to curb our population growth. And there are signs that that is happening. But given that it might not happen as fast as 20 years to really keep the lid on things, maybe we don't need to grow by quite that much. Maybe we'll pull it down a little bit, and let's hope that we do, because I think it's going to have a really serious impact on where we are. I think when we look at two of the major problems here in the Bay Area, and I think if anybody asks people, it usually ratchets back and forth between, is the worst problem traffic, or is the worst problem the high cost of housing? And both of those problems, I think, are really related to the underlying problem that we really have excessive growth in the local area. We don't have enough room for all the people to live here, and therefore the cost of housing goes up. And those that have their housing think that the worst problem is traffic. And that's because there's all these people that are trying to get into the jobs because they don't have housing. So those twin problems are right there, and they're really the underlying causes, excessive growth and the inability of this location to really sustain and maintain that much population. At least that's my sense of it.
How about you, Susan?
Well, a couple of things. One, I think we need to evolve in a smarter way as a city and as a region. If we made our cities more pedestrian friendly and less car friendly, we would have more room to grow a denser city and can have a robust economy and a more community friendly environment.
A city gets denser when you don't have as many cars?
Well, if a car takes up at least 6 times as much room as a person walking down the street. So if you build city centers, and of course this is a long-term vision, you can't do this overnight, but if you really start to develop your city so it's more built for the pedestrian as opposed to a car, and the cars are on the outside, you can put more people. Another idea, I know at the county, they're talking about it, is to have mixed zone where you have goods and services and jobs near where people live, as opposed to people living on one side of the valley and working on the other side of the valley. But having it so people can get entertained and get their food and go to work within walking distance or bike distance or a close commute by train, as opposed to having to drive across the whole Bay Area to get to a job.
Let me ask you another question before we go to Dena, because I told Dena in the beginning that this is her chance to sit and listen and kick back and relax while we grill you.
Eat a cookie.
Eat a few cookies. But, there's so much brain power down here. All the brilliance that went into building the computer industry, high-tech industry. Where do we rank when you start to give a grade report, when you grade us on the quality of life environmentally and urban planning? How do we fare when you look at the peninsula that way?
I think that we probably are sitting on our laurels, like the good student who got into college and now is sliding through their senior year, because I think that basically we have done a lot of good things, especially in the Mid-Peninsula, to protect the environment. We've got our baylands protected, we've got our hillsides protected with the Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. We did a lot back 15, 20 years ago to set up one of the first recycling programs in the nation. We've done a lot of good things. We also have bicycle lanes for people to drive to work. But I think we've sort of been sitting on our laurels in a lot of ways and not moving forward enough to be on the cutting edge anymore. In particular, the city of Palo Alto, I think, has fallen behind. There's some really interesting things going on in Menlo Park and in relationship in particular right now recently to the work with San Francisco Creek and how that's being managed now and has just passed. And Dena, congratulations to you all for doing that. This is a project actually that Dena started back when she was on the staff at Peninsula Conservation Center by bringing together government officials and citizens residents who had concerns about San Francisco Creek, and that developed into the Coordinated Resource Management Program, which I managed for a couple or 3 years at PCC, and now it's just become that the cities of Palo Alto, Menlo Park, and East Palo Alto have all voted to establish a joint powers authority to manage the creek.
And both counties as well.
And both counties have joined in too. So that's a real positive thing, which I think is still in the forefront of cutting edge. Maybe that'll be the positive senior project for the
very
local
cutting edge and
agencies.
it's very exciting. Yeah.
But that's one of the good things which has been going on. But in a lot of ways, I think we're sort of falling behind, and we do need to apply some of our brain power to coming up with some new solutions to kinds of things.
What do you think, Susan?
I definitely thought of the open space in this area. We're very blessed, and people 20 years ago really did us a great favor by buying up land and saving it. So we have beautiful surroundings. Also, as a bike commuter, I know it's getting more and more scary, more and more like you're taking your life in your hands to get on your bike to get around town. And to me, there can be tremendous improvements made there. We do have some of the best bike routes in the nation, but we've got a ways to go on that. I'd like to see that. City of Palo Alto also has a solar panel initiative right now that they're just starting to advertise. And I think, we're in California, we should be using the sun and getting away from using oil resources, which are non-renewable. So there's a lot of new things we can do, and I think we have fallen behind a bit as other cities have put together whole environmental coordinating bodies to look at how to move towards sustainability. And when we put together our comprehensive plan, the city of Palo Alto didn't even want to touch that word, while other cities have whole departments devoted to that, like Santa Monica and San Francisco and Seattle and San Jose. And so we need to get caught back up and move into the leading position again, because certainly we have the
Do
brain
different
power.
city councils have different reputations? Dena, I don't know if city councils talk about each other, but do they have different environmental reputations that you're aware of, or?
I would think that in the region, Palo Alto City Council would be considered quite pro-environment, though Susan and Debbie could cite any number of decisions that they would feel were not particularly strong environmental decisions. Palo Alto has a reputation of being a very strong environmental community and having a very proactive environmental government. That comment says more about where other governments are in the Bay Area than where Palo Alto is. And during that conversation that we had before this show started, I was talking about my vision of the environmental community. Their job, from my perspective now as a public servant, their job is to help the public understand the issues and to embrace the solutions, because government is elected by the people. And if 50, 60, 80% of the people think it's really cool to drive to work alone in their car, government can do whatever they want, but that's what you're going to get. And so
What if the 20% are really noisy?
if the 20% are really noisy, it doesn't ultimately matter, because we elect our representatives who make the policy decisions. So Debbie mentioned the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority, which was just formed, and that's a great example. And I guessed 10 years, but Debbie pointed out to me that it took us less than 10 years to move from a very informal beginning conversation into something formal but non-profit and very much just kind of on a whim and a prayer that something might happen, and now it's an official governmental function.
What are they going to do? What are they doing with the creek?
The JPA is charged with flood control and protection of the habitat values of the creek, and the JPA will be the responsible body for finding the appropriate funding to do that. That creek is the border between two different counties and any number of cities and Stanford University, and the jurisdictions for that creek are a nightmare. So
Do some
this
of them
is
want to
incredible.
cement the creek in and others want to leave it?
No, that's the wonderful thing that happened, is that the Crimp, in its nonprofit, just people with a good idea, in that way, they have actually been able to educate the community and rally the community's values around San Francisco Creek. With the floods that we had last year, as disastrous as those were, we now know that we must deal with the flood control issues, but we also know that we don't have to deal with those issues by pouring concrete. In fact, that's the most expensive, if you just want to look at price tags, that's the most expensive solution that we could come up with.
And there are various alternatives which are going to have to be worked through by the JPA, which would provide for environmental protection, but also provide for a method of flood control protection. And then it's going to be really up to the people in the community to examine those alternatives, figure out the relative price tags, and then give some direction to the JPA as to how tax dollars should be used and what other perhaps federal sources of resources could be found to do something.
This issue also brings up another thing that has changed a great deal in government and makes everybody's job that much harder, and that's the passage of Prop 218, which was a state initiative, really took away independent taxing authority, took that authority away from local government. And now if the city of Palo Alto needs money to do a flood control project, or needs money to build a public safety building, or needs money to acquire parkland, it has to go to the voters. And in most cases, 2/3 of the voters have to say, yes, I'm willing to be taxed for this. So in this county, the taxing authority for the creek is the Santa Clara Valley Water District, who is also a member of the Joint Powers Agreement. And they're already talking about going out and trying to raise money under the requirements of Prop 218. And in this county, Palo Alto is part of a northwest flood zone. And so people in Cupertino will be voting on the tax that helps pay for flood control in Palo Alto.
Wow.
It's going to be very interesting to see what really happens.
Yeah, it's challenges. Going back a bit, though, to the whole issue of proactiveness on the part of local government, and one of the really wonderful things I think which has happened in the past few years in our region has been that Menlo Park has been able to set up a shuttle system. And they've been doing this for a few years with using developer fees, so that developers who build commercial buildings have to put money into a pot that provides for this little local shuttle, which has gotten started in Menlo Park. And it not only serves commuters coming into the commercial facilities, but also links people with the downtown and links people with the senior center. And it's something which has gotten started because of a proactive city manager and a proactive city council that were caring about environmental issues.
So in that case, the city, the government was in the lead of that vision.
Right, and we've had in Palo Alto our wonderful council member Dena Mossar, who's also been working to make this happen.
Don't make her feel so good.
Yeah, really.
We want a little sweat and a
We'll
squirt.
give her a heart attack. But the problem is that we've been a little slow, and now we're going to be hit probably with figuring out how to fund this thing, and I'm not quite sure.
Because we don't have the same kind of system with attaching developer
Well, it was
incentives.
done again, and I don't know exactly all the legal mechanisms where it was done, but it was a legal allowable thing to do it that way. And the question is, how are we going to fund our one that we're talking about doing in Palo Alto? Because I've been to a couple of the shuttle bus workshops, which are really interesting, and if we could find a way to fund those, they'd be terrific. But I don't know, what are the plans for funding that system? What do you know about Dena in terms of?
There are a number of things that have been talked about. A tax has been talked about.
And we'd have to raise 2/3 of a vote?
A tax that they have to vote for in Cupertino?
No, that would be, because it would be a Palo Alto shuttle, it would be Palo Altans. Maybe a 0.25% sales tax. That's something that I've heard floated. It certainly would be possible in some cases to collect developer fees. The case law is very clear, however, about money that you collect from developers. As part of approval of a development process, there has to be a nexus. Nexus is a word I hate. It just crops up everywhere. But you've got to be able to prove that the amount of money that the developer pays is directly related to the impacts of his project. And so it's easier to talk about collecting developer fees than it is actually to collect significant amounts of money.
Somebody has to calculate the impact of his development.
That's
or
right. That's right. And the courts are very, very pro-developer in this case. I mean, you don't really get away with pushing the edge. Other things that are being talked about for funding, I was in a meeting with the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority just a couple weeks ago, and we've begun a dialogue with them about their transit service in Palo Alto. Are all of those pieces really necessary? Is there a way that we can combine forces and provide adequate coverage and not have to fund, particularly the 88 and the 86 bus have some limited value to us here in Palo Alto. So there are a lot of different things that we're going to be doing. I don't think that charging for the use of the shuttle is really on the table, though. I think there's pretty
But
clear
what
that we
about,
want it to be free.
do you see it as part of a city council role, or is it your role to get people to actually, let's say the shuttle gets funded and it's there, and if they build it, will they come? But will the city take an active role in creating incentives and publicizing it, and I don't know, Smokey the Bear commercials, that got people to stop litter, the all littering campaign?
I can't imagine that wouldn't be the case.
Because how do you get people out of cars? I mean, you must be, if traffic is the thing that everybody is fetching about on this peninsula because there's too much cars.
You make it convenient. You make it convenient, and you make it frequent. And if we could have a shuttle that would run every 7 to 15 minutes down our major thoroughfares, and it would be convenient and safe, and we would know that it would run at night after the movies were out, you could still catch it to get back, that you could use it to go out to dinner with, and those kind of things would make it much more doable. And I've lived in another country for a while, and that was the kind of bus system that existed. You could wait no more than 5 to 7 minutes, and a bus would come along, and it would take you, and you could make one or at most 2 transfers and get where you wanted to go for large distances. And it was easy and safe and convenient. And the problem with our bus system now is we never know how long it's going to be unless we read a schedule, and it takes 45 minutes to an hour to get on a bus like the 86 bus, and it takes you almost as long to drive through town to get from Midtown to the Stanford shopping center as it would to walk there. So it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to ride it right now. That's my sense.
What's your goal of getting people out of cars, Susan? How does it work?
How does it work? Well, certainly to make it convenient and cost-effective. I would reemphasize what Debbie said. If we did have a service in Palo Alto, we would also publicize it through our website and through our newsletter, et cetera, and tell our membership about it and do what we could do. Use our vocal power to get people excited about it.
One of the other things I've heard too about the effectiveness of transit is I went to a workshop a number of years ago put on by Peter Calthorpe, who's a community developer and designer, and he talked about the density of development is an important issue, that if you have the typical suburban development, which is 6 units to the acre, there's not enough people there to sustain a transit system. But if you would only double that to 12 units per the acre, you would have enough people that would make a frequency of transit use be viable and workable. So it's not that we're asking for massive numbers of people to be moved in, or skyscrapers full of people in Hong Kong type of frequency or density, but just simply doubling it, which could be done with things like granny units or more bungalows and a different kind of housing stock that we have. And I think that's again something that the council might be
this is
able
such
to
a, we were talking about this before
Yeah,
too. This
yeah.
is that incredible thing where Palo Altans by and large do not support that. And it is interesting. We want a shuttle system. Palo Altans, I think, are pretty united wanting a shuttle system. But when you really look at the community, the challenge is, where do you put the routes? Because if you think about Palo Alto, we are not a dense community. So you sort of have to create a density where there is no density in order to have a viable shuttle route. And that's a challenge. It's going to be a challenge for us. And again, people have to be out there advocating for, just 12 units the acre, granny units. I mean, the lid comes off the political can every time somebody mentions granny units.
Is that what you meant that Palo Altans don't support, is the higher density? Or?
Well, that's absolutely the case, is that Palo Alto is a suburban community. We do have an employment base here in the community. But we are basically a suburban community.
The renters might feel otherwise about the
The
density.
renters may, in fact, feel quite differently.
They need to voice their.
That's right. But this is a change. This is going to be a change. And right now, the political mood of the community is not so much into density. It's interesting to watch some of the conversations that have gone on in recent times and are going to continue. The whole area downtown that's being vacated by the Palo Alto Medical Foundation. You know, there's the issue of density is very much a part of that conversation, and there's a wide range of opinion on what the ultimate solution to that should be.
Well, we need to eat some more cookies because we're going to have a little break here. And when we get back, we'll talk about some of the other issues of pollution, issues of creative solution building. And so we'll be right back after this message.
I just want to make sure it stays a very pedestrian-friendly town. So I don't want parking garages, I want shuttles. And it's whatever it takes to make it a place where people feel really comfortable walking and biking.
Take a walk, ride a bicycle, live in a house on Bryant Street and ask yourself, why aren't there more streets like this?
I live very near where they're talking about the new Luckies, and I haven't heard what would happen with the traffic arrangement at that intersection if Lucky's were expanded. I'm real concerned about that. It's already a complex enough, confusing configuration that I've seen a lot of people act inappropriately.
Let's think about getting rid of the leaf blowers. Please do not poison the ground squirrels. It will kill the birds of prey.
Look for renewable energy. Get away from fossil fuels and nuclear power for our energy needs. We need to conserve our resources. We need to save our ancient forests.
I understand that Palo Alto is doing a rebate for solar energy cogeneration, and I think that's a great thing, and I thank you for that.
One of the things I really like about this city the most is the recreation department. I'm really happy about that. But what are you going to do about all these houses that are getting ripped down and that are destroying any sort of diversity in our community?
Talking about Menlo Park specifically because that's where I live. So I feel really good about what they're doing. As imperfectly and as difficult as it is, I feel good about it. So I'm encouraging them to continue.
Well, they could be here with us right now. Having a little fun is the recommendation that was given to us, and it seems to be a very important thing. It's good for the body system, having a little bit of fun. So whatever they do, may they enjoy it.
If not now, when?
In my lifetime, I've gotten to enjoy some wonderful things, the beauty of nature and living without fears for a lot of my life about pollution and toxicity. And now children are having to grow up with these concerns, and it's not fair. In a way, we're robbing them of their childhood. And so what I'd like to say is let's all do our part, and especially the leaders who can make profound decisions about how to protect our children. Please do your part to look out for them and make sure that they have a future that they deserve.
I would like to see the city of Palo Alto reevaluate this whole issue of fluoride. There has been information that has come out over the last 10 years that shows that this product really should not be in our drinking water.
I just want to invite all of you city council people to really use this year of preparation for the new millennium to listen to the earth, to take time every day to listen to what the earth needs from you personally and from all of us collectively, and to then take that wisdom that you get and to really commit to not only yourself and your family and to your city, but to all of us on the earth, and not only all humans, but all species. Thank you.
And what you just saw were some of the people who attended the sunrise ceremony for Earth Day 99 on April 22nd. And it was sunrise. It was 6 a.m. when it started. And, and people shared some of their thoughts. And I wonder, Dena, sitting as a city council member with an environmental tradition in your own life. Where do you have like a little voice on the side that says, remember about the environmental aspects? Because you deal with so many issues of how to get money for the human services that we need. And I mean, where do you put environmentalism as you sit and act as a council person?
I don't know. For me, I think it's just part of who I am, and I've done it for a long time. And lots of things come across my metaphorical desk that have environmental implications. And I often feel that my understanding and concern about those implications is not reflected around me. But I do raise the issues. I do ask questions. Sometimes they're questions that I ask of staff. Sometimes I'm able to just sort of raise a little bit of consciousness about if we do this, then this happens, and by doing it this way instead, it would be better. But basically, I find myself often feeling kind of lonely about that perspective. And it isn't that the city staff and the council isn't concerned. They're just not thinking about all the small little things that add up to bigger things.
I often relate, as a public access director of public access TV, to what it must be like to be full-time environmentalist, because in the scheme of things, we in public access TV are so marginal to mainstream media. And it's like when we were talking about getting people out of cars, it's so piecemeal. We get a few people out each week, each month maybe, or whatever, but it's such a big picture that you have to chip away at. And I'm wondering how, does it feel hard and difficult to be an environmentalist sometimes?
I want to say something.
Yeah,
I
say
really
it.
do. It's like you have to be this incredible optimist. You have to be undaunted. You just have to be so optimistic against just incredibly negative odds, because if you're not, you couldn't get up every morning because it's so hard. I mean, I've always been amazed that I was able to keep doing it because it's always so hard.
But when you say optimist, do you think that there'll be a day when everybody walks to work or everybody tunes into their public access channel?
It's just a belief in that things can be better.
You have comments?
What do you think?
Well, a couple of things. One is I'm excited to go to work every day. I love what I do, and made the transition from a Silicon Valley job where I made a lot more money than I do now to getting up and really enjoying my job. So there's a personal satisfaction there. And also, an article I read a while back, actually it was in the Institute of Noetic Sciences journal, was about the transformation that humanity is going through, and it's kind of a race between the paradigm shift we need to get back in sync with the planet and the path we're on. And sometimes I think it's just going to take a grace of God, and I just want to help that happen. And in the 10 years I've been really doing this with either all my free time or full time, there has been quite a change. There's a lot more awareness. So I think the change is happening, and there's only so much I can do as an individual. I think any person that isn't concerned has to also step back and just say, all I can do is my part, and try to improve every day of educating people and educating myself and doing things a little better the next day, just like in any job. And that's all you can do. And then you've got to let go of the bigger picture and realize that other people are responsible, and hopefully there's a divine power helping us out too.
Take whatever we can get. Debbie, what about you?
Well, I think the religious metaphors are common and perhaps apt. In some ways, it is sort of like getting religion and preaching out a gospel of living more lightly on the earth. And A lot of people do get caught up in the sort of hellfire and brimstone aspect of it, saying the world is falling apart and we've got pollution everywhere and the rainforests are gone and we're all choking and we're not going to survive, et cetera, we're all going to die of cancer. And those things may be true. On the other hand, if one sees there are so many problems, there's two responses. One is one can just sort of, die of misery and a feeling of frustration, or one can say, okay, I got to do something about it. And that's, I think, the more positive response to it. And that's how I feel that there's no really any choice about it. We just have to keep working to improve the world.
In a way, like you're directing an agency that's very focused on one aspect, on trees.
Yes.
And a lot of what Bay Area Action's focus has been is the Arrastradero Preserve and
we do education and hands-on restoration and try to combine education with getting out there and doing it.
Yeah.
Does it help to just get out there and do something and just kind of focus on one thing that you can do for a while, or
Absolutely. I think I know, for instance, if I paint a room, there's a great sense of satisfaction when you're done because there's something visible. And getting out there and cleaning a creek or doing habitat restoration or building a trail, you get that kind of satisfaction of seeing your work improve. And also just being outside and interacting with nature is a wonderful experience. I was out in the creek with the First Presbyterian Church a couple weekends ago, and the kids were splashing around in the water, and everyone was just so happy. It was just a really neat experience, joyful experience, just to be out there and seeing the birds and splashing in the water and learning about the plants.
I
So
once did a creek cleaning and we were pulling out things like shopping carts and pieces of bicycles and motorboat pieces, and you'd think, it would be a real bummer, everybody's crying at each thing that we dredge out, but it's not at all. It's kind of fun, and you're making a difference.
We've done the same kind of thing with the tree planting that we do with Canopy, and I was really touched about one sunny Sunday afternoon in January. We were planting trees over in Briones Park, and we had a group of people from a Jewish young people's group were coming out to plant trees in honor of the Jewish tree planting holiday. And we also had a group of kids from Gunn High School that had come out, and those folks were there because they were part of a group and they were having a good time with their group, and they were really wonderful helpers. And then there were people from the neighborhood who came by too. But we also had 3 different sets of people that came because they had seen it in the paper. One was a man from a different neighborhood with his daughter, another was an older couple, and another was a younger couple with a child. And these people said, we just saw about this in the paper and we wanted to come out and help. And it just moved me to tears when I heard about that and talked with them, because they felt this was an opportunity to do something good for the environment and good for the community, and a way to spend a lovely sunny Sunday afternoon in January doing something good for the world. And it just motivated me so much to keep doing my job, to be able to provide this opportunity.
Your work made a calling for somebody that day anyway.
The other thing I think is really important, and a little bit of what you said, Susan touched upon that too, is a lot of the time people, as I said, in the environmental movement, put out all these horror stories. But in actuality, I think what we need to do is to present the joy of working in tune with the environment, working together in connection with each other, and weaving the fabric of our communities and sort of pulling together the connections between people and the earth. And actually, I think it's often found that people who live a more environmentally responsible lifestyle, riding your bicycle, eating organic food, eating less meat and lower on the food chain, spending less money to buy stuff and more money to sing songs and be with your friends on a creek cleanup, those kind of things, you not only are expending less money, you're also usually doing things which are more healthful as well, and you improve your own body and your own health, as well as improving the planet. So those things often go well together. It's a more healthful lifestyle, a more environmentally responsible lifestyle, and a more economical lifestyle, and it's really much more pleasant and much more fun.
So that bumper sticker about he who has the most toys wins is not realistic. I mean, it's not, if you fill your room with all the things you can buy, you won't be as happy as going out and cleaning up the
I think
creek.
those kids that have more fun splashing around in the creek than those that have fun, playing with broken toys or little electro
Or the
cars that crash into things and break.
computers, yeah.
Right.
For those who are joining us now and thinking these women are fascinating, they are, and they're part of a show called Border Crossings. It's a new series produced by Mid-Peninsula Access Corporation, and we delve into regional issues. And we're talking about environmentalism because Earth Day 1999, we've just celebrated April 22nd, and we want to keep celebrating it throughout the year. There's something I've heard a lot about, or I don't know if I've heard a lot, but it's always made an impression, these sort of trade-offs that local governments have been able to do, like, okay, if you don't develop this, or we'll let you develop this property here if you free up this area as open space. These sort of bargains with developers, and I'm wondering, are there examples of that kind of creative bargaining here, and do you see it on the Palo Alto Council
It's
at all?
not something that's really significant in Palo Alto. Open space in Palo Alto sort of translates into areas of lawn or maybe some plantings. We are virtually a built-out community. We as a community did, as Debbie said, protect our baylands and our foothills, and there's really
What about
very
other
little
areas,
opportunity
like when it
left.
comes to pollution credits and maybe that's only on a state level, but I think companies have gotten, they've made it more lenient for them to pollute if they clean up in other ways. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I've heard about that kind of.
Talking about pollution credits.
Yeah.
And those are sort of state regulatory. There's air pollution credits, which brings up an interesting thing that's on our horizon that not many people are aware of, and that's in the Coyote Valley. Not only is the city of San Jose talking about developing Coyote Valley, opening it up for more commercial development, but there's talk of a new power plant. And the cities in the south of our county are very concerned about the air quality impacts of that power plant.
What kind
and
of
that
power?
power plant, electric power,
Uh-huh.
that power plant is intending to use air pollution credits in order to be able to pass muster, to pass the regulatory requirements. So that we're going to be dealing with some very interesting issues. That's a regional issue.
Yeah. And when you get to, we were talking a little bit about this before, but the high-tech industry has sort of a clean image. It's not like heavy manufacturing. And yet, this area was notable for having some pollution in the groundwater. And what's the real story with high-tech industry, the chip industry, and the use of toxics in that? I mean, are we safe? Is that a major concern?
I think
of
a little bit on the history, and the two of you can chime in on other areas that you might know about too, is that there was, in some ways, the presumption that we had a really clean industry here because it wasn't dirty smokestacks, and this was back in the 60s. And then some cases developed where there were found to be clusters of cancer down in San Jose and some areas of the Mid-Peninsula Mountain View area in particular, and it was found that they were due to leaking underground tanks that were affiliated with some of the Silicon Valley early semiconductor manufacturing plants. And so the work was begun, and people like Byron Scher, who's now our state senator, and Ted Smith with Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition, and the Palo Alto fire chief and some of the other fire chiefs from around the area came together, and they created these model leaking gas or leaking tank laws. So they actually had to do containerization of tanks and cleanup, and that's why we have we've a number of Superfund sites in Santa Clara County, which is probably, in fact, I think it is one of the areas that's got more Superfund sites than any other county around, even though it's been presumed to be a clean environment. But a lot of work was done to really clean them up and to do a lot of good work, and a lot of new pollution prevention and pollution treatment technology has been developed in Silicon Valley because of the work that was done. to try to clean up those sites. And in addition, and those laws then became model for the state, and they became model for the nation. Similarly, the model toxic gas laws were developed because of the realization that we were using in our Silicon Valley manufacturing processes toxic gases that would create, if little bits of them were let loose in the environment, disasters as bad as the Bhopal in India from a decade or 15 years ago. But again, we've had forward-thinking legislators and forward-thinking local governments, and people like the Police Chiefs Association or Fire Chiefs Association have come up with these model laws which really are working. And I think we're in pretty good shape in a lot of ways.
So that's not an area where we're sitting on our laurels and new stuff is concerning environmentalists.
Well, I think there is still a lot of concern about the pockets of pollutants that are there, and about public safety reporting and requirements. One of the things that Silicon Valley Toxics Coalition has done is they've just recently put out on their website a map showing the areas where still pollutants happen. And there's a correlation with lower income neighborhoods in San Jose and where you can still find dumps of toxic materials and things. It's sad to know that. And unfortunately, too, a lot of the production that's been the dirtiest and the messiest has been shipped overseas. So we're not sullying our own nest, but we look at what's happening in Southeast Asia, and I think there's some, real pollution problems there, as well as, over the border in Mexico. A lot of the really dirtiest stuff has been shipped overseas.
Yeah, actually, when you buy shrimp, it all comes from Thailand, and I found myself thinking, maybe I don't want to buy this shrimp because
What was it swimming in?
what used to be a problem for us here is clearly a problem there. It's real interesting.
I met a guy at a party a couple of weeks ago, and he lives on the edge of the land that the sons of the Fisher family, the Gap stores, they just bought up all this forest area, Mendocino, and they're cutting it down. And I asked him, that must be horrible. He says it is, but Pacific Lumber owned it before, and they were doing the same thing, and they've just moved they've bought all these forests in other countries. So,
Louisiana Pacific.
well, was it Louisiana Pacific? Okay, I'm sorry. But they, so that it's been going on, it continues to go on, and it's going on where we're not as focused or as aware, and that's scary stuff.
I think there is a lot of away. You move things away, and none of us like to, who likes to deal with problems and terrible things? And
is there a role that the city plays in any of that? I know with Burma, the city decided not to buy products from Burma after a lot of awareness building on the part of it.
That's correct. That was before I was on council. But
could that ever, I don't know if that'll happen environmentally with things like that, where a country is ruining its rainforest, or...
I think,
know.
I don't know.
Of course, it hurts the country if you stop buying from them or something.
I once heard an interview with a woman from the Ford Foundation, and they were talking about these very issues. And she said, I'm the director of the Ford Foundation, and my job is to make money so that I have money to give for all these wonderful causes. They are. The Ford Foundation does wonderful things. So her tactic was, I'm going to invest where I can make money, and I'm not going to make social decisions there because I can make a direct social contribution through the grants that my foundation provides. Another example of why there's not, there's never an easy.
Before we go further, I do think we want to really highlight some of the other successes that have been made in the South Bay area and in Palo Alto too, and regarding water quality in the Bay. We've really done some good work with the whole effort on pollution prevention of how the water treatment plants have been working. And a lot of credit, I think, does need to go to people like Phil Boble, who's the environmental quality manager at the Palo Alto Water Treatment Plant, and his staff, because of the work that they've done with educating industry up the pipe about not putting things into the sewage treatment system that would then go through the processes and go out to the bay. And that happened in large part because, not only because Phil, of course, was a forward-thinking manager, but also because of the efforts of South Bay environmental groups that basically were bringing lawsuits to stop that process too. But it's been a synergy between environmental advocates and the public treatment facilities and the business, which has come forth and has agreed to make those changes too. So it's been an ongoing process.
And it's absolutely true that there is still today a collaboration between industry, government, and the environmental community on water quality issues in the Bay Area. It's exemplary.
Do you find when one city takes an action, like we talked about Phil Bobel being forward-thinking, that other cities notice and it makes an impact on what other councils
Phil has a great
do?
deal of impact in the region. Other treatment plants, there's, in this county, Sunnyvale and San Jose also operate treatment plants, and Phil has set models for many other treatment plants for how they process and behave. I want to mention sort of on a new thing that began last year as a test with Palo Alto Hardware. Larry Hassett agreed to work with Phil Bobo's public outreach consultant, Janet Cox, and they put together a program at the hardware store where there was information on the shelves about you could buy this product and it would be better for the water than this product. And they did a training for their employees, and Larry Hassett, the owner of Palo Alto Hardware, found that it was really good for business. He made a lot more money selling gardening products, encouraging people to buy clean rather than just the usual thing that they always bought before. And because of that success last year, the city of Palo Alto has expanded that program to include other hardware stores in the area, so that there's some consumer education about buying clean, safe products.
Very good.
I'm very excited about that.
I'm going to break for a second. We don't do commercials on this channel, but we have public service announcements, so we'll be right back.
You're going to give your recipe for your cookies?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Well, maybe when the commercial's on. I mean, the non-commercial commercial. So we'll be right back after this message. And
sign up for one of MPAC's low-cost video production classes and create a program for the Mid-Peninsula's Electronic Town Square, Channel 6 and 77. Join a studio production crew or borrow MPAC cameras and videotape interviews, lectures, events, and performances. Let your inner videographer out for some fun. For details, call 494-8686 or visit www.mpactv.org.
welcome back to Border Crossings. I'm Elliot Margulies here with Debbie Mytels, Susan Stansbury, and Councilmember Dena Mossar. And we are still celebrating Earth Day from April 22nd. And I'm wondering, like, what do you remember in your life that's when the light bulb, that's the wrong metaphor, but it clicked and I want to do work in the environment as my profession. What happened?
Gosh. In college, I worked for Rainforest Action Network and educated the people in UC Santa Barbara about rainforests. And one day a woman walked up to me and said, well, do you understand what's happening to our forests in California? And I said, no. She says, well, they're coming down just as fast. And that was really my shift from an international focus and saying, no, there's a problem overseas or a problem in South America, to looking at what needs to be done locally and in our own state and country to protect the environment. And that's how my focus went from a more global perspective to a local perspective. And working on Earth Day 1990 as a volunteer was very inspirational and exciting, and it was a bunch of very thoughtful people that were concerned about the environment, but also very positive. They weren't just sitting around complaining. They really wanted to go out and do something and find innovative ways and fun ways of making a difference. And that was kind of the framework we built Bay Area Action on. And so it's fun and exciting as well as helpful to the environment.
I think you really do have that spirit of fun. I mean, Bay Area Action has the best parties of any political organization in town. And Debbie, what about you? Do you remember when it hit you that you were going to choose that
Well,
work?
I started working as a paid basis for the environment back in 1987 when I started working as a program director at Peninsula Conservation Center. And prior to that, I had worked in the Palo Alto schools for 7 years as a coordinator of community involvement for the school improvement program, and was very active in the PTA locally and did a lot of education activism work. And when I switched jobs and issue areas from one to the other, some people said, how can you change so dramatically from education to the environment? And I said, oh, to me, it's really all of a piece. Because to go from worrying about nurturing children and trying to develop that sphere of life to moving to protect and nurture other aspects of the environment, to me was really just a continuation of what I consider to be my life work and my life philosophy, which really is to talk about ways to protect and preserve and nurture the diversity of life on the planet. And so I see it all of a part. And in part, I also see it relates very strongly to efforts that people put out to talk about racial and social justice. And the work that I did through Leadership Mid-Peninsula when we were trying to bring together our 3 communities of Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and East Palo Alto is similarly all of a piece to me, because I don't think we're going to be able to survive as a human species unless we can learn to live together in harmony with the other people on the planet, and we can bring together the concerns of people and the other species as well, and we can realize that we're all one aspect of the life fiber that's keeping things going, and that to me is my life work, and it flows very easily to work in all of those areas, and I try to do that with what I do.
Because you see them all threaded together. So environmentalism is very connected to social justice and other sorts of movements.
Do I get to answer the
Yes.
question too?
Yes, please do.
I'm a native Californian, and I was born and raised in Southern California. And that is a very strong motivating factor for me. I'm old enough, I'm of an age when I remember camping all over this state when there were very few people here, relatively, and the state was incredibly beautiful. And I've watched that disappear over my lifetime, and it makes me very passionate about preserving what's left, because California, I mean, you know, always success is a problem, right? We're such a great state. We've always been such a beautiful state. Our climate is so wonderful. Our mountains, our ocean are extraordinary. People want to be here. And the more and more and more of us that are here, there's less and less and less of what I remember as being California when I was young. So that's my driving force.
Yeah, well, judging from the look on your face, that your eyes are sparkling, you have a smile, that somehow you've taken that message that you said earlier about trying to stay positive even when things really are difficult, you know, and challenging. Well, I would want to thank you for all being here today and prolonging the celebration of Earth Day, reminding us to keep celebrating, and remind those at home to watch Border Crossings on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays on Channel 6 at 10 p.m. and on Channel 77 on the 1st and 3rd Sundays. And on May 15th, mark it down on your calendars at 10:30 a.m. on a Saturday before you have to go out and do your yard work. Call in. We'll have the mayors of East Palo Alto, and Menlo Park here again, and we'd like to let you ask them questions that morning. So thanks again, and join us again for Border Crossings. Goodbye.